Hey everyone, it's SoloScribe here. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here today to talk about something a little bit different. The Fallout TV show is fortunate to be worked on by executive producers Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, famous for their previous work on Westworld. For those unfamiliar, I would highly recommend watching this series. Not only is it packed full of fantastic science fiction, but it's probably best known for its incredibly shocking and satisfying plot twists, with many characters' true identities and motives not being revealed until much later on in the series. These big reveals often have you completely reanalyzing everything you just watched in the show, and it is a fantastic way of getting the community engaged and guessing at what's really going on. During the height of Westworld popularity, community engagement and fan theories ran wild during the times in between seasons, and it made for a really enjoyable television experience. This is precisely the type of writing and directing that these talented folks are known for, and it's probably the reason they were chosen above all others to make this Fallout series. So it's important to look at the Fallout TV show through that lens. Knowing what these two people are capable of and knowing their work on Westworld panned out, it's safe to assume that they're bringing a similar intensity to the show and will be incorporating these kinds of major plot twists to the Fallout franchise. And the one character that's really captured my attention the most is Lee Moldaver. For those of you who haven't finished the Fallout TV show, just a warning, this video is fan theory, so naturally there will be spoilers ahead. So please, if you don't want the show to be spoiled, finish watching all Season 1 and then come back here to this video and watch the rest. For the rest of you, let's jump right in. So the TV show begins with Lee Moldaver, a raider leader who gained access to Vault 33 under the pretense of attending a marriage between Lucy and one of her raider comrades, infiltrating the vaults in order to kidnap Lucy's father and Vault 33 overseer, Hank McLean. This is the events that, of course, encourages Lucy to go out into the wasteland to save her father by tracking down the mysterious Lee Moldaver. From her travels in the wasteland, it's revealed that Moldaver already has a sizable reputation among other wastelanders as a very dangerous and powerful raider leader. It is revealed that she was known by the residents of Vault 4 as a figure called the Flame Mother, who they worshipped and claimed would eventually bring about their salvation. We get a few more bits and pieces along the way, but in the final climactic scenes of the season, we finally learn the entire story of Moldaver's life. Turns out, Lee Moldaver was actually around over 200 years ago, right before the bombs dropped. Back then, she was known simply as Miss Williams, and was a gifted scientist working towards cold fusion. Cold fusion is a hypothetical process whereby a fusion reaction can be induced at room temperatures, making it much more feasible, scalable, and cost-effective than traditional nuclear fusion. This hypothetical source of energy could provide unlimited power to the world, and she had originally hoped for its discovery to bring about the end of the Resource Wars, which is a series of global conflicts that had been ongoing for 20 years, among which included the ongoing war between the United States and China. Unfortunately, her research was purchased by Vault-Tec, made proprietary, and was deliberately kept from being used. It's revealed that limitless energy and world peace would have undermined Vault-Tec's plans to have a monopoly on power in the post-apocalyptic world. She would be prevented from pursuing her research, and even her name was actively discredited by claims that she was secretly a communist. Furious about these developments, Miss Williams, or Moldaver, became a regular speaker at the gathering of intellectuals in Los Angeles at the Hollywood Forever funeral home. She gave speeches against the war, the government, and the corporations that were complicit in planning the end of the world. It's here that she eventually meets Cooper Howard, better known as the Ghoul in post-war times, and manages to recruit him to spy on his wife who works for Vault-Tec. She convinces him that she is in fact not a communist and says that that's just an ugly word they use to describe people who aren't insane. This is the last we hear about Miss Williams before the war, and the next thing we know about her is that sometime in the year 2277, a full 200 years after the bombs fell, she's somehow living in Shady Sands where she meets Lucy as a child and her mother, Rose McLean. Now, the relationship between Moldaver and Rose is not completely understood. It's clear that they are at least very close friends with the way Moldaver cares for her even after she's ghoulified, but it's never explained if they had any kind of romantic relationship as well. In either case, they're living happily in Shady Sands until the year 2282, when Hank McLean comes to Shady Sands to convince his wife and daughter to return home. Unable to convince his wife, and under orders from Vault-Tec to destroy any civilization on the surface that may threaten the future power of the vaults, he takes Lucy by force back to Vault 32, but not without detonating a presumably nuclear weapon on Shady Sands, destroying the entire city and ghoulifying his wife. This is where Moldaver takes on a more active role in the surviving factions of the NCR, meets the occupants of Vault 4, many of whom were refugees from Shady Sands, and convinces them in some kind of future salvation. She also makes contact with Siggy Wiltig, an Enclave scientist who managed to find her long-lost cold fusion research and is heading her way. Into the series, she mounts a frankly hopeless defense of Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, all in order to activate her cold fusion device and bring power back to Los Angeles. This shows the wasteland just what might be possible, while simultaneously delivering the most powerful source of energy into the hands of the Brotherhood of Steel. She dies after asking Maximus what he thinks the Brotherhood would do with unlimited power, and tells him you might be able to stop them, you might not, or maybe all you can do is try, setting the stage for Maximus to potentially turn on the Brotherhood in Season 2. It's really clear that at this moment, Moldaver sees something in Maximus, the same thing she saw in Cooper Howard, that Maximus is a good man at heart and that he can, with the right persuasion, be flipped to her side. So by the end of the season, we're left with some seriously important unanswered questions about Moldaver, and if this is one thing we know about these writers, they're not sloppy. We have no idea how Moldaver survived the war. If it were a trivial matter of her stealing a cryochamber like the rest of Bud's buds, then she had every opportunity to say that. Her character deliberately said nothing. This unanswered question is deliberately placed in front of us, which means it probably has some bearing on the plots in the following season. Now, before we go over the theories, we need to make some assumptions about the character of Moldaver. Namely, she's a woman on a mission, and that mission is to bring peace and order to the world by providing unlimited energy with her cold fusion research. That has always been her goal since the moment we met her, so it's logical to base our theories on that being her main motivation for survival. I'll go over the main theory for the mystery of Moldaver's survival. The most floated theory by the community so far is that she survived the war the same way the other Vault-Tec members survived, by sleeping in a cryopod. We see cryopods used in Fallout 4, and they can in fact work for hundreds of years provided they aren't tampered with and are in a safe environment with a power supply that will last that long. So somehow she acquired a cryopod pre-war and somehow put herself in a vault or a bunker that was fully maintained with a power source that would last for like 200 years. Just to awaken exactly around 2277 for no clear reason, that's the first thing that doesn't make sense to me. What year would she have even set the cryopod to? I mean, the world's about to end, she sees Vault-Tec's evil plan, her mission is to subvert it and bring her research into the world. She couldn't have known that an Enclave scientist would have found her research and been willing to deliver it a few short years after she was set to awaken. Also, where would she have gotten one? In the Fallout universe, cryopods are only known to be in possession of Vault-Tec. She's blacklisted from companies and research agencies by claims that she's a communist, and even if she did get one, where exactly would she put it? So the feasibility of obtaining a pod doesn't make sense, the ability of keeping the pod activated for hundreds of years isn't there, and even if this happens, the overall strategy of this plan just isn't sound. She wouldn't have known which year would be best for her to wake up in. So here we are, finally the point of the video. This is my theory for how Moldaver survived the war. Now, I know this community, and I know I'm going to get many eye rolls from this, but just hear me out. What if Moldaver, the Flame Mother, is not actually Miss Williams from before the war? What if Moldaver is a synth? Even weirder, what if she is a collection of several Moldaver synths? Now, I know that that explanation seems completely out there right now, and maybe even it sounds like a cop-out, but just bear with me for a second. Because there are many things in the season that make me think this explanation fits best with what we know, and it's actually the most appropriate choice for the writers to have made on the show. So, as good Fallout fans, let's take a look first at the timeline. Let's see if it's even possible first. Looking at the timeline, the first known appearance of Moldaver post-war is around 2277 in Shady Sands. Whereas the first Gen 3 lifelike synth prototype was created in 2229 and was the cause of the broken mask incident in Diamond City. Flash forward several decades to the events of Fallout 3, and in the year 2277 we discovered that Gen C synths are actively trying to escape the Institute with aid by the Railroad. In the Replicated Man quest, we find out that the security chief of Rivet City, a man by the name of Harkness, is in fact the synth that escaped, and that he has no memories of being a synth. His memories of the Institute were erased by the Railroad and replaced with new memories. So it's possible by the year 2277 that a synth, or perhaps multiple synths of Moldaver, were created, with aid by the Railroad, and they fled the Commonwealth and wound up in California. Now that the timeline's possible, let's look into the memories of Moldaver. Now, a big question is, why would the Moldaver synths have memories of Miss Williams? This one is actually the easiest to explain, as it just requires us to take a look into the story of Nick Valentine. Nick was a Gen 2 synth prototype created by the Institute with memories implanted from the original pre-war Nick Valentine. Before the war, Detective Nick Valentine was a human who worked in Chicago and was tasked with taking down the notorious criminal Eddie Winters. The detective ultimately failed as Eddie Winters was released, leaving Detective Valentine a shell of a man. After this, a brain scan was commissioned by the scientists at CIT to help him recover from his trauma. These brain scans would later be uploaded by the Institute into the Synth prototype Nick Valentine, giving him his personality. These implanted memories, though not originally his, were still so powerful and compelling to synthetic Nick that his goal to track down and capture Eddie Winters 210 years after his original failure still remained. So not only does the technology exist to scan brains and later upload the memories into a new synth, but the created synths seem to view them very personally. They adopt the goals of the original human whose brains they scanned and incorporated them as their own. And in the case of Valentine, he enthusiastically and very emotionally continued the quest to bring Winters to justice. It would make sense to me that the way Moldaver ensures her survival is through people, through academicians and intellectuals who believed in her ideologies. In the final days before the war, she would have her brain scanned and memories copied, the way Detective Valentine's were, and that data would be stored alongside Nick's at CIT, the organization that next becomes the Institute. So this now brings us all back to the Institute. Now, one more hurdle to this theory is that there would have to be someone or groups of people within the Institute who are still believers in the ideologies of the old Miss Williams. Enough so that they would seek to bring her back from the dead through synthetic copies. It would make sense that Miss Williams had political allies throughout academia who were more sympathetic to the views of a fellow scientist having her work stolen, her reputation tarnished. I'm sure there would have been many members of the CIT faculty who she would have trusted to keep her memory safe, with promises that one day they will bring her back. Now, it's all great to say this at the beginning of the Great War, but in order for this plan to work, there would have to be plans to pass the knowledge of Moldaver's plans over generations throughout the Institute. That seems plausible to me, as the Institute, despite appearing like a completely cold, heartless, and narrow-minded organization in Fallout 4, actually does have internal dissent among the scientists living there. Despite changing significantly from its pre-war days as CIT, the Institute still is academia. These are academicians and intellectuals. They have their own ideas and they disagree. Some have expressed genuine desire that they should do more to help those on the surface, while some even express sympathy with the plights of the synths, so much so that they'd help them escape. Despite the best efforts of the Institute's internal security, the SRB, they never seem to be able to stop these leaks of synths into the outside world, aided by sympathetic members of the Institute. It seems within the realm of Fallout 4 lore, it's definitely possible that this kind of operation to reawaken copies of Moldaver in the 2060s or 2070s could have succeeded. If they did succeed, we know that by the year 2277, there is a network of railroad agents on the surface that would be capable and willing to help these Moldaver copies escape the Commonwealth. If this did happen, it would have been conducted in absolute secrecy, so there would be no in-game reference to this operation, and none of it would have even had to have happened after the events of Fallout 3 or 4. Let's consider the Flame Mother for a second. So another mystery this helps to answer is why the residents of Vault 4 worshipped Moldaver as the Flame Mother. On the surface, it seems like Moldaver simply made them a promise, perhaps convinced them that she could restore order to the world through her research, but this doesn't feel like a compelling enough reason to worship someone. Think about it, their entire world was just destroyed. Why would they believe someone who just gave them a fairy tale about limitless power? These are traumatized survivors just trying to move on from the unthinkable. And what is the name Flame Mother anyway? Now, Hank wasn't there when Shady Sands was nuked. He had already left with Lucy back to the vault. The only people who were there and remember what happened were the survivors in Vault 4 and the recently ghoulified Rose. What if one of the Moldaver synths living in Shady Sands did die like so many others? What if the survivors saw her burning to death in the blasts and buried her? Perhaps she died saving Rose from the inferno. Now imagine their reaction when another synth copy of Moldaver shows up again. Perhaps multiple copies were living in Shady Sands even. The Vault 4 survivors would have thought that she rose from the dead, and the promises that she gives them about restoring order and bringing salvation to the wasteland would suddenly seem so much more convincing. This is exactly how I imagine a religion to be born, by an act of resurrection. Perhaps this is the origin of the term Flame Mother. Maybe they watched her burn to death in the firestorm, only to rise again, show herself to the survivors with promises of salvation to the wasteland and a rebirth of the NCR. Either way, there has to be something much more compelling for why she's worshipped so enthusiastically by these people. I'm sure we don't have the full story yet, but this synth theory would explain things. Finally, we're at the events of Moldaver's death. This theory is the best explanation I have for Moldaver's choice in the climactic final battle of Season 1. She's a smart woman, having survived for hundreds of years and facing down the most formidable foes both pre-war and post-war. She does this by knowing when to attack and when to retreat, wait, and plan. Yet, her ultimate goal this season was to sacrifice her life that she protected for hundreds of years just to turn the power back onto Los Angeles? Just as a political or symbolic gesture, that doesn't seem like a good enough reason to me. Why didn't she run? Why didn't she take the cold fusion chip and hide? She had the cover of battle to escape the observatory. Clearly, she knows that she's probably the only one in the world who understands this technology enough to get it to work for all of humanity. Surely she knows the importance of her own survival, and yet she throws her life away simply to make a grand symbolic gesture to a couple of wastelanders and Maximus? This decision just didn't seem right to me. It seems like Moldaver had something else up her sleeve, like she knows that this isn't really the end for her. It would make sense if there were other copies of her in the wasteland, and that this mission for her copy was just to showcase the power of the cold fusion device. I don't think we've seen the last of such an iconic character. In fact, in a recent interview, the actor playing Moldaver, Shady Sands, was asked whether or not Moldaver would return in the following seasons. To which she said, of course, she could not give anything away, but that she would definitely be willing if she were asked. Now, of course, a television show isn't real life. Just because something makes sense or doesn't make sense, like the cryopod theory, doesn't mean the writers can't force it to happen. They could simply explain away in vague details that the cryotechnology was more widespread and that Moldaver's intellectual group somehow had connections to a secure bunker for her to survive in, and her waking up in time was all just a happy coincidence. Suffice to say, the only thing that really matters when discussing fan theories is what works best for the writers. What are the writers trying to achieve here? Does it make sense for the writers to be incorporating some element of Fallout 4 right now to be revealed in a later season, perhaps? I think it does. We know that there are ambitious goals for the Fallout franchise. The writers are huge fans of the series, and it's clear from the production and the writing on the show that they tried to incorporate as much as they could from all the games. If this show has plans on running for many seasons, it becomes almost inevitable that they would have some kind of plot point in some future season about the events of Fallout 3 and 4. And it's important to know that this wouldn't spoil the games. Bethesda has made it clear that they don't want, at least at the moment, for anything to happen in the Fallout TV show that would force a canon ending to one of their games. After all, one of the best things about the Fallout games is the ability of player choice to impact the region of the game. And once a sequel is made and the regions are revisited, the specific choice of the player character becomes set in stone. If Moldaver is a synth and there are multiple copies of her around, would that not mean that the Institute survived the events of Fallout 4? Well, no, actually, not at all. If several copies of Synth Moldaver were made, then this all could have been done before the events of Fallout 4 even started. The memories of the original Miss Williams would have been given to all of them, and all of these Moldavers, aware of each other's existence, will begin working together to finish the task of the original Miss Williams. To bring Vault-Tec to justice, to steal back her research on cold fusion from those who would abuse it and limit it, and to give it to the people in order to finally bring about peace and limitless energy to the world. This was, after all, the ultimate goal of Miss Williams, and she was facing nearly impossible odds. She had made enemies of the corporations, the entire government, and most of the public. In the end, all she had was her voice and her ideas to convince some like-minded intellectuals to support her plans. She had to think long-term, just as Vault-Tec was doing. She had to plan, not just years down the line, but centuries, in order to beat these people. And all of this just seems so entirely Fallout to me. It incorporates a major event in Fallout 4 without canonizing any player's decision. It explains the mystery of the survival of Moldaver, and it even makes her seem even more larger than life. It explains the decisions that she made this season, with her choosing to die just to send a message and sort of fleeing with the device during the battle. And most importantly, it would add such an amazing new character and dynamic to the show in later seasons. Just think about it, multiple copies of the same original mind all existing to bring these hopeless ideas into fruition. She is the ultimate underdog, facing impossible odds and yet entirely unwavering in her faith that she can persist and she can succeed. This is Fallout. This is so completely Fallout. So I know this theory is kind of over the top and kind of out there. I hope that even if I haven't convinced you, I've at least made my theory seem more plausible. After all, if any of you were around during the height of Westworld, you know that the time in between seasons is absolutely the best for sharing even the craziest fan theories. I hope that you at least enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe. I'm still very new to YouTube, and any subscription really helps me grow my channel. I think I'm still years away from that, really, but in any case, every new subscriber is just great moral support. So if you have any other fan theories, please comment down below. Let me know what else you'd like me to make a video on, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching!